Okay, here's our video today. Cellular respiration. What is it? And we're going to be talking about it in humans. But every creature, every living organism goes through this. And we'll talk about that. So, in simple terms, very simple terms, this is the process of breaking down food to get energy. That's it. That's the simple part of it. Let's just write it in green up here. So it's the process. Maybe we should change the color. Let's use yellow. That'll be better. There it is. The process. And again, I'm giving you the simple definition here of breaking down food, breaking down that good food you eat to get energy. We're talking about energy for your cells, right? Your cells. And the energy is called ATP. It's adenosine triphosphate. So I'll write it over here. Some people say adenosine, adenosine, however you want to pronounce it. And you'll notice it has this prefix here, tri and phosphate. So it has 3 phosphate molecules in it. So this whole thing is really we're trying to eat food, break down that food, and get energy. And every cell in your body needs energy. And you need energy, right? So let's write something over here. So everybody, every living organism has to take in food. So your body has to take your food you eat, and this is like, you'll hear this term macronutrients. It's a fancy word for saying foods. And you know the macronutrients. There's fat, which are lipids. Another word for fat is lipids. And you know about proteins. You need protein to build muscle. And of course, carbohydrates. Find in your fruits and your vegetables, bread, carbohydrates, carbs. You'll hear that. And all this food will be turned into sugar, and the sugar is glucose. So let's get a clear page going. Get a clear page. And why don't we change the pen to green? Use green. So the food, no, that's not working. No, let's try something else. Let's use red. There we go. So the food you eat will be broken down into sugars. And your body prefers glucose. That's the preferred sugar, glucose. And here is the formula for glucose. You'll see this over and over again in other videos also. It has 6 carbon molecules, so that's C6. It has 12 hydrogen molecules, so it's H12, and 6 oxygen. There it is. There's glucose. We'll go back. We'll come back to that. And we know that carbohydrates have glucose in them. Fruits have fructose, and that fructose needs to be converted to glucose in the liver. So anything else you eat, any protein or your fats, so protein, fats, remember we said lipids, and other carbs, see other sugars that are like fructose and lactose, and other sugars need to be converted. Because again, your body prefers glucose. It needs to be converted to glucose in the liver. So your liver has a big job besides cleaning your blood. So again, if you're not eating foods that have glucose in them, your body will convert it to glucose. So that's the first step you have to think about. We're eating foods, your body's going to take the food you're eating, turn it into glucose. There's the formula for glucose there. And if you don't have glucose, what happens? Your body will convert it. Now, I'm oversimplifying things here. This is just a basic introduction to cellular respiration. So let's continue. Now, what happens after you eat the glucose? Well, it's going to go into your stomach. Obviously, the food goes into your stomach. Your stomach is going to convert everything into glucose and your small intestines. And your stomach and small intestines will release glucose into your blood. So let's clear that out. Let's get a picture of that. There's your stomach. And in the blue over here is your small intestines that go over here too. So let's get our pen going using red. So here we have glucose, the acids and the enzymes in your stomach and in the small intestines here and here. They will release the glucose. So the stomach and the small intestines will release what? What do you think? Glucose. Our friend glucose. C6. What do you think? What's the H? H12. That's right. And oxygen, how much? 6. You got it. So they'll release this glucose into your blood. And now another body part is going to be alerted. And I'll show you a picture of that. It's the pancreas. So once your pancreas knows that there's glucose in your bloodstream, it's going to release insulin. And insulin is a hormone, and hormones are chemical messengers, right? They send signals to your body. They tell your body what to do, basically. Let's show a picture of the pancreas. It's behind the stomach, right? And it kind of looks like a piece of corn on the cob or something, right? So it's behind the stomach over here, trying to show what it would look like. And make sure I get my pen ready. Let's use blue. So the pancreas is part of the endocrine system, will release insulin, this hormone. It's a peptide hormone. The pancreas will release insulin once they know that there's glucose in your blood. And that insulin is going to attach itself to every cell in your body. The insulin needs to attach itself to the cells so it could bring that glucose into your cell. And that's what's really needed. Your cells want that sugar, that glucose. So let me get my red here. Let me just draw a very oversimplified view of a cell. Let's say this is your cell. There's your cell. And let's just say that we'll use blue. This is the insulin. And of course it doesn't look like that. So here's the insulin. Now the insulin will attach itself to an insulin receptor. So here it is, there's the insulin. And it's not opening the door, but it's almost like it's knocking on the door. And let's use green for this, the glucose. And here's the glucose entering the cell. Of course, there's a lot of steps involved in this, but this is, again, a simplified version. So now we have all this glucose in the cell. Let's use red here to say that. So the insulin helps the glucose enter the cell. And the glucose will enter the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm in that cell, and the cytoplasm is that gel-like liquid that kind of holds all the organelles in place. And let's just write this down. Cytosol, that is the liquid part of the cytoplasm. So we have the glucose in the cytoplasm. And what's going to happen, this is the first stage. It's called glycolysis. Fancy word. So this is really the first stage, glycolysis. The glucose is in the cytoplasm, thanks to the insulin, thanks to the pancreas, thanks to you eating your food. And in the cytoplasm, glucose will be turned into pyruvate. It's another molecule. And again, there's many steps involved in these cycles, and I'm just giving you a basic introduction. We're going to be talking about each cycle in depth in other videos. So this C6, you know the rest. H what? H12, you got it. And what's the other? You got it. Oxygen, 6. It'll be converted to 2 pyruvates, which is pyruvic acid, and that is C3H4O3. So glucose into 2 pyruvates in glycolysis. It's also going to make ATP. It's also going to make another molecule called NADH. But I'll talk about that in a minute. And here's a better picture. Actually, we're missing a stage. The glucose that turned into pyruvate is going to enter the mitochondria. So this is the mitochondria, and that's the power. You hear this all the time, the powerhouse of the cell. It is where your energy is made, right? And eventually, we're going to be making ATP, as you can see in this diagram. So in glycolysis, we did release 2 molecules of ATP. And you'll see we'll keep making ATP until we finally get all that ATP we need. Just think about it. 1 glucose molecule is going to make all that ATP we need. So the next cycle actually is called the preparatory reaction cycle. So let me write that there. Let's use purple. So the glucose, now the pyruvate, is going to enter the mitochondria. So glucose, now pyruvate, 2 of them, remember, enter the mitochondria, as you can see in the picture. And that first stage, which you don't see here, in the mitochondria is called the preparatory reaction stage. Just preparing it. And you got to get ready for this new word, because the pyruvate, get ready, pyruvate is going to become something. It's going to become acetyl-CoA. Big word, right? I'll write it. Acetyl, actually that should be a small o, CoA. Sometimes you'll hear it say acetyl-CoA. So it's either acetyl-CoA, which some teachers say, or sometimes you hear teachers say acetyl-CoA. So it's a molecule. And that is going to be used in the Krebs cycle, as you can see there. Let's review real quickly. Glucose enters the cell. It enters the cytoplasm in the cytosol. And the glucose, 1 glucose molecule, remember it's a sugar, will be transformed into 2 pyruvates. And then you can see ATP, some 2 ATP molecules, energy molecules, this energy, will be released also. And then there's this carrier you see here called NADH. And that's going to be used in the Electron Transport Chain. That's the last part of this whole cycle. And then as the pyruvate, these 2 pyruvate enter the mitochondria in the matrix, the pyruvate will become acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA. So rewind the tape, try to remember that word. And here's a better picture of the mitochondria. And it's in the matrix, right over here in the matrix, that all this has taken place. In the matrix. Not the movie The Matrix. All right. Now let me make a box. Make a box here. Make it easier to see. Have a little box. Get rid of that now. All right. And then we'll write glycolysis over here. That's the glycolysis. This is where the glucose will be turned into, do you remember? Starts with a P. Pyruvate. Got the Y there. There we go. So, and of course, it's also going to make ATP. It's going to make 2 molecules of ATP. And it's going to make this carrier called NADH. This carrier will carry electrons later into the electron transport chain. That's the final stop. That's where we're going to get a lot of ATP. And I'll talk about that in other videos. So then the pyruvate enters the matrix of the mitochondria. And the first cycle is called the preparatory reaction cycle. Well, not really cycle. Preparatory reaction. I'll change the color. This is where pyruvate, well, that's not going to work. Let's try blue. Maybe we'll try that color. That's not going to, that color. Nothing works, but well, yeah, purple kind of works. This is where the pyruvate becomes acetyl-CoA or acetyl-CoA enzyme. And a little O there. Acetyl-CoA. Now in this also, CO2, carbon dioxide, is released, and it'll head its way, it'll get to the lungs by the red blood cells, and we'll release it. And if there's plants nearby, they'll love it. So CO2 will be released, and some more NADH is created. We need that NADH because they're like carriers. They're going to carry electrons. They're going to carry electrons. And we need electrons really as catalysts to make ATP. The next stage, we'll put a little box over here, after the preparatory reaction, is the citric acid cycle. Citric acid cycle. And it's sometimes called the Krebs cycle. And in that cycle, CO2 will be released also. And then we're going to get these more NADPH, NADH that is. So we're going to have more NADH and another one. It's called FADH2. And don't worry about those too much. We're going to talk about each one in other videos. So we have the preparatory reaction, the citric acid cycle, and finally the electron transport chain, where we finally get all our ATP that we need. And also in the Krebs cycle, there's going to be 2 more ATP released. But in the end, 34 will be released, giving you a total of 38 adenosine triphosphate ATP molecules. So from one glucose molecule, we got 38 ATP. And that's the basics of cellular respiration. So in the next videos, we're going to talk about each one. We'll talk about the preparatory reaction stage, then the citric acid cycle, and then finally the electron transport chain.